Thank you all for joining us here at I-80 Sports, where today the NHL regular season is over, which means it's time for the Stanley Cup playoffs here in 2023. It's amazing that we're already here. We've got a lot of matchups to break down for round one, so we're here for our round one prediction video. Guys, thank you all again for joining us here at I-80 Sports. Thank you all for joining us here again at I-80 Sports. Make sure that you subscribe down below, youtube.com/I-80 Sports, where maybe from time to time throughout the Stanley Cup playoffs, we could be going live. Hell, if the Devils and Rangers series makes it somehow to Game 7, maybe we'll even live stream during one of those games, and we'll see what happens because, well, we've got a lot of thoughts on that matchup, and you're just going to have to watch the rest of this video to see what our thoughts on that matchup, as well as the rest of the matchups for round one of the 2023 Stanley Cup playoffs. You don't want to miss it. youtube.com/I-80 Sports. Subscribe, hit the bell notifications so that way you guys know when we go live, and drop a comment down below. What matchup are you most excited for in the playoffs? And just join the conversation with our thoughts throughout this episode and ongoing. And if you're on Twitter, make sure you follow us down below at I-80_SportsNHL. And if you follow us already, thank you guys so much because we greatly value all of your support. I'm Brian. He's Tom. Tom, how you doing?
Doing well. And here we are at probably the best time of year if you're a hockey fan, whether your team's in or whether your team's not. I love the first round. I love the second round. You have games on all night. You can watch there's so much to watch. So many good things going on. So, Stanley Cup playoffs, round one, and here we are again.
It is amazing. It's funny because, I distinctly remember a good, almost 3 years ago at this point, doing our first playoff prediction. And what a time it has been so far. It's just so much fun to see. We've seen a lot of things come and go. We've seen different hockey shows come through. And, well, we're going to get even more of that because Shoresy Season 2 has just started its production, which makes Tom and I super happy. If you don't watch it and you don't watch Letterkenny in general, you need to go out and watch it. If you love hockey, if you love Canadian culture in general, go out, watch Letterkenny, and then when you're done watching Letterkenny, watch Shoresy. And if you're not even done watching Letterkenny, watch Shoresy.
That's actually how I did it. So.
Yeah, it is just Tom and I could go on for hours on it, but it is a bombastic time. It is so much fun, hilarious. Definitely for those viewers that are of age to watch it too. So, be warned in that regard. But you guys aren't here to talk Shoresy and Letterkenny, or maybe you are. But we're here to talk the NHL playoffs. So let's get started with our first matchup. We're going to start in the Western Conference. We're starting with our Western Conference matchups here. And I want to be excited about some of these matchups, and I am excited about some of these matchups, but we got to start off with maybe the most predictable one of the bunch, or maybe not so predictable. The Colorado Avalanche versus the Seattle Kraken. And Tom, I'm going to let you start here on this one. I mean, do you think this is a clean and easy sweep for the Colorado Avalanche, or not so much so?
I think it's going to be an easy series. I don't think it's going to be a sweep. It's a very interesting one. I never thought Seattle would be a playoff team and a 100-point team in Season 2, but they made the playoffs, which is great. They actually are one of the top 5-on-5 teams in the league. They are relying on basically a by-committee scoring and a by-committee approach, which is kind of what they have to do. They don't really have much choice. Whereas Colorado's kind of the opposite. They're the defending Stanley Cup champions, yes. They're not what they were last year, no. But that cup hangover hasn't been as pronounced as it's been with other teams in the past. I said that the Avs, and I've been saying it for months now, that they would win the Central on the last day of the season. And lo and behold, look what happened Friday night. They won the Central on the last day of the season. So they snuck in and did just that. Losing Gabriel Landeskog, it hurts. It does hurt. I'm not going to beat around the bush with that. That is very true. That really does hurt them. But Nathan McKinnon's been on fire as of late. Kale McCarr is not the world beater he was last year. He's still been pretty good. You're getting contributions from Rantanen and Nick Chuskin. Alexander Georgiev has been a great starter stepping into the shoes of Darcy Kemper, the skates of Darcy Kemper last year. So While the Avs aren't the same Stanley Cup winning team they were last year, the same juggernaut, I'm thinking the Kraken will maybe, hopefully, they get one home win for their fans, but this is Avalanche in 5 for me.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this is a tougher matchup than I would otherwise think. Because a week ago, I probably would have said a Colorado sweep because I'm thinking to myself, Gabriel Landeskog could actually be coming back for the playoffs after missing the entire 2022-2023 regular season. But unfortunately, it has been announced that he is also going to miss the entirety of the 2023 Stanley Cup playoffs as well. So, with Colorado losing their captain for an entire year, who was a major piece to their Stanley Cup run and win last year, I don't know necessarily if this is so cut and dry. Seattle has played very well this season, and especially for a second-year team. And I just pulled up the stats now, and there's been a number of contributors on this team. You had 6 players that scored 20 or more goals this season. Jaden Schwartz, Oliver Bjorkstrand, Daniel Sprong scored 21 goals. I didn't even realize that one. And 46 points in 66 games for him. Matty Beniers, 24 goals in 80 games as well. Jordan Eberle scored 20 goals this year. And of course, Jared McCann. What else hasn't been said about him for his season with the Seattle Kraken? 40 goals in 79 games. Well done by Jared McCann. Another reason why Seattle has been steady is they've had steady defense and steady goaltending as well. Philip Grubauer has been one of the best goaltenders of late of the past few weeks. And I think carrying a hot goaltender into the playoffs is always a really good thing. Look at what happened with Dallas last year with Jake Ottinger. And we'll get back to him in just a little bit. But the defense has also been very good as well. Vince Dunn, one of their best defensemen this year as well, 64 points in 81 games. An unsung defenseman here, Adam Larson for the Seattle Kraken, 173 blocks and 222 hits to couple along with that. And he's averaging the most ice time on the Seattle Kraken with Vince Dunn. So there's a lot to look forward to for Seattle's first chance and crack in the playoffs. But that being said, is it going to be enough to make the difference and maybe even knock out the reigning and defending Stanley Cup champion in the Colorado Avalanche? That I don't think so. I think Colorado still has the edge. I think Seattle is going to challenge Colorado and still going to push them a little bit. I'm not going to say Colorado in 5. I'm going to actually say Colorado in 6. Seattle, I think, does get a win or two on their own home ice. But I think this is still Colorado's series to win. There's just a number of players for them right now that, give them the edge between Mikko Rantanen's 50-goal season, Nathan McKinnon over 100 points, Cale Makar having another fantastic season as well. Steady play from Alexander Georgiev as well. He's going to be the wild card for the Colorado Avalanche, meeting Alexander Georgiev, but still going to be a fun matchup. Definitely a matchup that I think I'm going to try to follow as much as I can. Next, on to our next Western Conference matchup that I think I'm going to probably follow the most. And I think this is going to be the most fun Western Conference series and could even be the most fun series to watch for this postseason. It's the Dallas Stars versus the Minnesota Wild. And man, I have seen predictions go either which way. A lot of outlets have it split 50-50 at the moment. I know I have my thoughts. Tom, I want to hear from you on this one. Who do you think wins between this matchup between the Dallas Stars and Minnesota Wild?
Excuse me. This isn't too hard for me to figure out. Both teams, they have great goaltending. Jake Ottinger down in Dallas. You have Marc-Andre Fleury up there in Minnesota. I think the goaltending right now, it's a wash. If you go by the best player overall, it's obviously Kirill the Thrill. It's obviously Kirill Kaprizov. But that's not enough. That's not enough. Dallas has better D. Dallas has better forward depth. You look up and down that lineup, and they have the talent spread out very nice. We have Jason Robertson on line 1, Jamie Benn on line 2, Tyler Seguin on line 3, Joe Pavelski still potting goals like he did way back in San Jose. I look up and down at Dallas, and I don't think that a superstar in Kirill Kaprizov and a very good goalie and Marc-Andre Fleury is just going to be enough to get them by these Dallas Stars. I just don't think so. I don't think the Wild can match the depth on D and on forward that Dallas has. That loss, and I'll say it again until I sound like a broken record and I got to start recording myself. That loss of Kevin Fiala is paramount right now for Minnesota. I'm sorry. You could say what you want about Joel Eriksson Ek and the like. You could say what you want about Freddie Gaudreau. Kevin Fiala they're going to feel this loss. I'm telling you that right now. So the best case scenario here, I'm going Dallas in 5. Worst case, maybe 6, but it's a hard maybe. Like I said, experience is going to win out here. Depth is going to win out here. And on top of all that, Dallas has their top players on line 1, top young players, and their veterans on lines 2, 3, and 4, which is even going to be better because the less ice time for those guys means they'll be fresher. I got to go with Dallas here.
Yeah, for me, I'm thinking Dallas here as well. I mean, so many people that I've seen on the internet and between media outlets and social media, a lot of people have been quick to say, well, it's, more than likely going to be, Minnesota. Minnesota's more talented. I just don't know about that. I mean, yes, as Tom mentioned before, Minnesota does have Kirill to thrill Kaprizov, and he is one of the best players in the entire NHL. Missed some time in the regular season, and that should be noted. But this Minnesota team is certainly missing Kevin Fiala, and Kevin Fiala was a big difference maker for the Minnesota Wild in the past 2 playoffs for them. It is another tough matchup to peg, and I think this is going to be a really fun matchup. But I still don't understand why some people are writing Dallas off, because to me, I think the Dallas Stars, and this might be the boldest take of the day for me. I'm going to have a couple other bold takes coming in, but this might be my boldest take of the day. Dallas might be the scariest Western Conference playoff team this year. Dallas, I have pegged right now on multiple brackets. I have the Dallas Stars going to the Stanley Cup final, and I have multiple reasons why. Just like with the Seattle Kraken, they've got scoring depth. And just like the Seattle Kraken that I mentioned before, the Stars had 6 different players score 20 or more goals. You had Jason Robertson, Jamie Benn, Joe Pavelski, Rupe Hintz, Tyler Seguin, and Wyatt Johnston scoring 20 goals as well this season. Looking in the back of the net right now for the Dallas Stars, Jake Ottinger is one of the best goaltenders in the entire league, and he's no stranger to clutch situations. If you have any question about him being clutch, look at the playoffs last year and him standing on his head last year. At the deadline, the Dallas Stars won the deadline by picking up Evgeny Dadonov. I really thought about that deal and thinking like, wow, this is going to be great. One for one deal. Great for Montreal picking up Denis Gurianov. Great for the Dallas Stars picking up Evgeny Dadonov. Dadonov has had 15 points in 23 games for the Dallas Stars. Bit of a resurgence for him and looking more like the playmaker that he can be. And I think that could be a big difference maker too for the Dallas Stars. It's no slight on Minnesota, though. Minnesota does have a decent team. They're in this weird purgatory phase right now, though, where they're just good enough to be in the playoffs, but I don't think they're quite good enough to really make a difference in the playoffs. I think they're a team that in the next few years, with the younger players that they've been adding through the draft and through trades, I think that Minnesota is going to be a very scary Western Conference team in a few years. Their time's not here just yet. But once you got some particular players for Minnesota, namely Jesper Wallstedt, potentially manning the net for Minnesota in the next few years, I think Minnesota could be a scary team soon. That being said, Dallas, I mean, to me, it's Dallas for sure. My prediction is the Dallas Stars in 5 games. But I know it's my boldest take there that Dallas might be the scariest Western Conference team, but is it that bold? I don't know if it's that bold.
You know who they kind of remind me of? Kind of like those teams, those Cinderella teams out of the East in the late 90s, early 2000s. You had like, I'm not talking like Florida or Buffalo, who basically just relied on a neutral zone trap and a hot goalie. Maybe more like a Washington or a Carolina, where you did have a hot goalie, yes, but you had the personnel to back it up. Remember, Washington had guys like Adam Oates and Peter Bondra up top who were no slouches. Carolina had Ron Francis and Rod Brendamore up top as well. So, whereas their goalie was a big part of their team, but it wasn't the whole reason why they got there. The only difference was they ran into those juggernaut Detroit Red Wings teams who just go look up their rosters, and then you'll understand why those teams didn't beat them.
Oh, yeah, not even that. I also seriously think Joe Pavelski is going to be playing like as a man on a mission this playoff. He had an absolute renaissance this year for the Dallas Stars and has been having a renaissance as a member of the Dallas Stars. And this year was no exception. And I really think that he is still very much burned by the fact that the Sharks did not win in the 2010s. And I think that's absolutely going to fuel him in this playoffs, especially since the Stars are one of the more complete Western Conference teams this year.
Sharks moving on to the next long time back then.
Yeah, exactly. Moving on to the next matchup here. It's an interesting matchup, but I don't know. I'm not as jazzed up for this particular series, but eviscerate me in the comments. The Vegas Golden Knights versus the Winnipeg Jets. And I don't know. This one just isn't that exciting to me. I was looking up and down their roster and looking up and down at what each team has done this year. I have a clear winner in my mind, and I don't think it's the clear winner that other people think. So, Tom, let's start with you because I think you share the same sentiment.
Well, here we are again with these Vegas Golden Knights. This could spell upset. The Knights are going to depend a lot on their first-line center, a guy by the name of Jack Eichel. I'm sure you heard of him before.
No,
guess how many minutes of playoff hockey Jack Eichel has played in this league? Big, fat goose egg, 0. And he's going to be staring down the other side, a guy named Mark Scheifele, who maybe has not won a Stanley Cup, but he's been in the playoffs enough, along with a guy like Blake Wheeler, another guy like Kyle Connor, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. On top of all that, you have superiority in net over there in Winnipeg and Connor Hellebuck. Can frustrate the hell out of anyone. The games the Rangers played against the Jets this year, they threw everything in the kitchen sink at him, and he didn't let anything go in. He can frustrate the hell out of anyone, and I can see him frustrating the hell out of guys like Jack Eichel and Mark Stone and Alex Pietrangelo and the like. This isn't going to be a short series, though. The momentum is going to shift. But I'm going to go right now, and I'm going to say I'm going Jets in 7 here. I think Vegas is personnel decisions over the last few years are eventually going to start coming back and biting them over the next few years. And granted, they finished in first this year, but I got a funny feeling the next couple of years might not be so great out there in Vegas.
Yeah, I got to start to wonder if maybe the luster of the Golden Knights is going to slowly wear away. And let me also just say this with the Vegas Golden Knights. They are still a very talented team. Jack Eichel is a very talented player, and this is a Vegas team that absolutely right now is missing Mark Stone, very much so. And I think with Mark Stone, I think this would be a much harder decision for me. And I think this would be a much closer matchup to me. And I don't know. I'm still sticking with the fact that this is kind of underwhelming to me simply because a lot of the Western Conference this year has been wildly underwhelming, minus a few teams. I mentioned the Dallas Stars before. They're not underwhelming. Colorado Avalanche, they're not that underwhelming. There's going to be one more team that we mentioned here that's not that underwhelming either. But the rest of Western Conference, man, it's just kind of playoff fodder. Teams that you encounter are just like, oh, how are we going to overcome this? And then you overcome it, pretty easily. And I don't know. Although Vegas has the star power to push through and they have a lot of their usual suspects, such as William Karlsson, Riley Smith, Jonathan Marchessault, even though they have a few of their usual suspects and also players who have won a Stanley Cup, namely Alex Pietrangelo, I have a lot of trouble believing that they beat Connor Hellebuck on most nights between the pipes for the Winnipeg Jets. That being said, also with the Winnipeg Jets, Kyle Connor has played a fantastic season and might be one of the most underrated players this season in the NHL. Mark Scheifele had a career resurgence as well, scoring over 40 goals this season as well. And don't doubt Blake Wheeler on the ice too. I mean, he just racks up assists and creates plays out of nothing. So the Winnipeg Jets, I think, are a stronger team. I think they're a stronger coached team as well. And I think coupling all of that and the inexperience of Jack Eichel in these situations, you got to prove it to me. Otherwise, I think Winnipeg squeaks through here. This is going to be one of those rare situations. Tom and I, you and I are in complete agreement here. I'm going to go with Winnipeg in 7 here. I'm just ready to get eviscerated by the entire West Coast. I'm just saying it right now. I'm just ready for it. But it's fine. Moving on to our last Western Conference matchup for the 2023 Stanley Cup playoffs. It's the Edmonton Oilers versus the Los Angeles Kings. And we got a classic rivalry here. Wrapping up the Western Conference, and we're going to have another classic rivalry wrapping up the Eastern Conference when we get there. But let's start here on the Western Conference side of things. Wrapping up the Western Conference, Edmonton Oilers versus the LA Kings. Tom, your thoughts here. Who wins this matchup?
Well, as you had mentioned, a classic rivalry, adversaries in the 80s, Miracle on Manchester in 82. After that, it was all Oilers. And then Gretzky got traded to LA, and then the Kings won. And then after that, it was all Oilers again. So definitely classic rivalry. It was renewed last year in a 7-game thriller. That series a lot of fun to watch. What's different about it this year is we have a healthy Leon Draisaitl, number one. Number two, what have I always said about Edmonton that is going to totally screw them? If they keep putting McDavid and Draisaitl together. They're not doing that this year. They're keeping them on separate lines, and that's what they need in order to win. I think LA's bottom defensive pairs might be a little bit better than Edmonton's. And obviously, if you were to rank the D-men 1 through 12, the six guys who they're going to dress, Drew Doughty's probably the best defenseman on either side. I think the Kings are going to have far too much to worry about keeping that top 6 over in Edmonton contained. I'm going to go Edmonton in 6 here. They got it partly done last year, where they were kind of on the ropes, LA, and LA had Edmonton on the ropes and they almost beat them. But I just think that LA still relying on Anze Kopitar and Drew Doughty, and don't get me wrong, they brought 2 Stanley Cups in 3 years to LA. But I just think they're both too old now, and it's just not going to work anymore for LA. And as good as the guys LA have brought in, and as good as the players they've drafted in, and granted they have a guy like Kevin Fiala, who I mentioned before, and they have a guy like Arthur Kailev, and you have guys like Quentin Byfield developing. But none of them have shown yet that they can be better than Kopitar and Doughty and take this team on their shoulders, unlike what's happening in Dallas right now. So it's just not going to work anymore. So Edmonton in 6 here. They move on.
Yeah, I agree. LA's still young and developing here, but they're not a pushover. But that being said, I mean, Edmonton should win this series easily, right? I only have one concern for Edmonton. Don't rely on the usual 4 suspects to score the goals, namely Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, and Zach Hyman. The 4 of them cannot do everything. All 4 players were over a point per game this year, which is fantastic. All 4 players had fantastic years, career years by all 4 players. The problem, once you get past Zach Hyman at the number 4 spot, there is a 40-point difference between Hyman and the next top point getter in Darnell Nurse with 43 points. Zach Hyman had 83 points. Darnell Nurse was the next at number 5 on the Edmonton Oilers with 43 points. You gotta have depth throughout your lineup, and you need to get scoring from all sides. That being said, you didn't have a full season from Evander Kane this year, given his injury. So I think having a healthy Evander Kane absolutely helps. You also have some interesting role players on this team that I think could contribute as well. Namely, Matthias Janmark is one person that I think of. Ryan McLeod is another person that I think of. If Kailer Yamamoto can get it going, he could be another type of player that could get it going too. You look between the pipes for the Edmonton Oilers, and that has always been a killer for them. What has killed them the most in the playoffs the past number of years? Their goaltending. Well, this is going to be the first real taste of the playoffs for their current starting netminder, Stuart Skinner. I do trust him a little bit more than previous goaltenders of Edmonton's past, but he's a wild card. And Edmonton's downfall has always been their goaltending, so I'm always going to question it a little bit. But this is a very different Edmonton Oilers team since the beginning of March. Matthias Ekholm has been a huge difference maker for the Edmonton Oilers since picking him up at the trade deadline from Nashville. Yeah, it costed you Tyson Barrie, but Matthias Ekholm has been a better defender, and they've needed a better stay-at-home defender. And he's been that and more for them. It could be all the difference for them. As for the LA Kings, the place where they could actually beat Edmonton is in their depth of scoring. Although Edmonton scored the most goals in the regular season, LA had more players scored 20 or more on their roster than the Edmonton Oilers. LA can run 3 to 4 lines deep at the moment, where I can't confidently say that for the Edmonton Oilers. I mean, yes, having Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl absolutely helps in that department, but you can't have them out there for 40 minutes a night. Despite this potential advantage for the LA Kings, I don't see LA hanging with Edmonton. Give it another year or two, and I think LA is right there with them. My prediction here, the Edmonton Oilers in 5 games. I think it's going to be a lot shorter series than people realize. Moving on to the Eastern Conference side of things, and we're starting with, well, probably one of the more predictable matchups here. The Boston Bruins versus the Florida Panthers, and I certainly have my thoughts on this one, and nothing controversial really, more so just kind of talking trash. But Tom, I'm going to let you start here. Who wins this matchup? Boston Bruins versus Florida Panthers. Who you got and why?
Well, the Bruins have them beat by a mile in every single possible thing that you could compare. Offense, defense, goaltending, special teams, depth, coaching. Well, I don't know coaching. Paul Maurice has a little more experience than, say, Jim Montgomery over there. But I think Jim Montgomery has personnel that he doesn't really need to be putting his foot down either. This is a battle of the previous 2 President's Trophy winners. The difference is that Florida last year was all offense. This Bruins team is all everything. They can do everything right. They can do everything well. And I know I voiced my concerns about the Bruins in terms of history, in terms of winning the 65 games, which they did break the record. Congratulations to them. Breaking the wins record and the point record. The wins record was held by Detroit 96 and Tampa in 19. They beat that, and they beat the points record of the 77 Montreal Canadiens, who swept not the same Boston Bruins, but the Boston Bruins in the finals in 1977. This is going to be the old school, we talked about the Oilers before and Wayne Gretzky, they used to say when they were interviewed, when they would have a Vancouver or an LA in round 1 back in the mid-'80s, that would kind of just be, okay, we kind of cruise through the end of the regular season. This is to get ourselves back in a game shape. And that's exactly what this is going to be for the Bruins. This is going to be over in 5 games. This is going to be an easy series. This is going to be eerily similar to, say, the 2014 Bruins team, who I thought should have won but didn't. It's a 5-game series. Nothing to see here. Good for you if you like the Bruins. Bad for you if you like the Panthers. If you kind of have a neutral opinion on it, probably not going to want to watch much of it, or if any of it at all. But yeah, this is just going to be an easy series for the Bruins before they are potentially going to have to start facing some controversy in round 2, depending who they see. But yeah, Bruins in 5, move along. Nothing to see here.
Yeah, so I'll get this discussion here for me started. Florida Panthers head coach Paul Maurice seems pretty confident in his team's ability to, quote, humiliate and embarrass the Bruins. However, I cannot share the same level of confidence. Matt Tkachuk for the Florida Panthers has been very good this year in his first year in Florida, possibly MVP caliber level of good. But the only reason why it's MVP caliber level of good is without Matt Tkachuk, Florida isn't even sniffing the playoffs this year. They're the only reason why they're here. Despite a hell of a year by Carter Verhaeghe, Alexander Barkov, Brandon Montour, and Sam Reinhart, there's just not a lot of depth on the Florida Panthers this year. They do not have Boston's depth, and they certainly do not have the ability to embarrass them. Frankly, the only thing humiliating and embarrassing is that statement by Paul Maurice. It shows just kind of how out of touch he is with his own reality when facing the Boston Bruins. I know he's trying to just jazz up his lineup, but I don't know. I don't think gooning it up is going to exactly do Florida any favors, especially when Boston can do the same exact thing, except a little bit better and more effectively. Meanwhile, what else can be said about Boston's historic season? Tom mentioned it before. They can do everything right. Their offense is elite. Their defense is elite. Their goaltending is elite. And possibly Vezina and Jennings caliber as well. It's the greatest season in the modern era and the most dominant since we've seen from the 1970s Montreal Canadiens. It is that level of dominant. Not many President Trophy winners have won the Stanley Cup in recent memory. However, just ask the Florida Panthers last year.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yes, the Rangers in 2015. Still not real happy about that.
So I err on the side of caution for Boston here. Don't take Florida lightly. Show Florida what a true President Trophy winning team can do. My prediction is, once again, same as Tom here, Boston in 5. That being said, I'm still going to watch this matchup because who doesn't like a good Matt Tkachuk scrap for every now and again? Because you know he's probably going to scrap at least one.
Him and Bertuzzi are going to be squaring up. I can see that.
Him and Bertuzzi will square up. Him and Marchand will exchange words. Maybe Marchand will give him a little lick on the cheek for good measure as well. I could see Tkachuk also squaring up with Trent Frederick maybe once in this series as well. It's going to be fun to watch. I think it's just going to be a good barn burner. Boston should have this handedly, though. And realistically, too, to mention the last thing with Boston, I realistically see only 4 teams in the Eastern Conference side of the playoff tree right now that could maybe give Boston a run for their money, and 2 of them play each other, and the other 2 would play each other. The 4 teams that I think could remotely give Boston a run for their money: Toronto, Tampa Bay, New Jersey, and the Rangers. Those are the only 4 teams that I could see realistically giving Boston any form of trouble. We'll get to that once we get there, though. But let's talk about one of those first matchups here on the Eastern Conference side of things. I'm going to learn how to speak this episode.
Excuse me.
I promise. But let's talk about our next matchup, the Toronto Maple Leafs versus the Tampa Bay Lightning. 2 teams that I think could actually give Boston a little run for their money, and Toronto would probably have PTSD. Toronto fans, rather, would have PTSD facing Boston again in the playoffs. But, Tom, I think we're going to have similar thoughts here, and I think we're going to probably get some hate from some people. But whatever, I'm fine with it. Toronto Maple Leafs versus the Tampa Bay Lightning. Who you got and why?
I can't do it. I won't do it. Will I drink the Kool-Aid? I don't know here. I don't know. I know. I really don't know what to think about this one. I don't know. I said the Leafs last year. I say the Leafs every year. And every year the Leafs go home. Every year. But I keep saying it. But I said this year I won't do it. They can't stop choking, right? It don't matter if it's the Bruins or the Lightning or the Habs. It doesn't matter. Or the Columbus Blue Jackets in the bubble. It doesn't matter, right? But I got to look at the Bolts here subjectively. Now, if you look at the D-core, right? Out of the 12 D-men who are going to dress, Victor Hedman is the best defenseman amongst these 2 teams. There is no doubt about that. There is no doubt. In net, Andrei Vasilevsky is the best goalie amongst these 2 teams. There is no doubt about that. You cannot argue that. It's not opinion. It's fact. Tampa has won themselves 2 cups in a row with another trip to the finals last year to add on to that. But the penalty in the salary cap, hard cap world when you win so much is you got to keep getting rid of guys. You had to get rid of that third line after you won in 21. You had to get rid of Palat and McDonough last year. And the loss of these players have forced them to kind of do what Edmonton was doing. Right now, they're doing something that I said that I don't think is a good idea, but they do it anyway. Right now, you're playing Steven Stamkos, Braden Point, and Nikita Kucherov on your first line. And to me, that's not good. That's not good when you have a offensive and you have the forward depth that the Toronto Maple Leafs have. When you're playing Ryan O'Reilly as potentially your third line pivot, that is leaps and bounds ahead of Tampa. Now, granted, the first line with Toronto is going to probably be Matthews, Nylander, and Bunting, I believe, because I know Matthews and Marner are no longer playing together. And, okay, put up Stamkos, Kucherov, and Point against that. Yes, but start going down the depth chart after that. I'm sorry, Anthony Cirelli's not better than John Tavares. I'm sorry, he's not. He's not. And can they trust Vasilevsky? Can they trust their better bottom two deep pairings to deal with this forward that the Toronto Maple Leafs have? And that is a question that's really in my head right now. That is a question of, I want to say on paper that the Leafs are going to take this. But every year the Leafs find a way to screw it up. They had Boston on the ropes in 19, couldn't get it done. You know, they had these same Tampa Bay Lightning on the ropes last year in Game 6. Could not get it done. If it goes 6 or 7 here, I'm thinking Tampa, finds that cup magic and pulls it out. But if these Leafs, if they can go up 3-0 or 3-1 after 4, I got to go with the Leafs here. But it's all depending on how these first 4 games go. If it's a knockdown, drag-out fight after 4 games and it's 2-2, I got to tip my cap towards the Bolts. But if it's 3-1, but say the Bolts won one game 2 or 1 game 3, that makes it closer. But if it's, say, 3-1 and the Leafs won the first 3, or if it's 3-0 here, I got to lean towards the Leafs. They have to win a round eventually. Just a matter of when. And right now, Tampa could be primed for them to beat them. But we all kind of thought that last year, and especially because Tampa was crap in the bed towards late in the season. But you go on paper right now, and this Tampa Bay team is not the same Tampa Bay team as last year or 2 years ago or 3 years ago. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again. It's a reminder of what Edmonton was doing, and it's a reminder of those Ottawa Senators teams from 15 or so years ago when they jammed Spezza, Heatley, and Alfredson on the first line and eventually got themselves into trouble for it. So we got to see what happens here.
Certainly got to see what's happening here. But, yeah, to me, we're going here again. I'm sorry, Toronto fans, but I think the pain continues. And as much as I would love to see the bleeding stop, the beatings will continue until morale improves, and morale is not improving right now. Tampa Bay is just as scary as they have been in the past few years. They might have taken a step back over the past year and a half, but they're still a Stanley Cup caliber team. Any other year, Toronto might actually win a first-round matchup here. But facing the Tampa Bay Lightning this year in the first round could be a nail in the coffin to their playoff hopes. However, Toronto does have a better lineup this year than they did last year. There's no doubt in my mind on that one. I'm just looking up and down at the stats here. Mitch Marner with a 99-point season. Willie Nylander, 87 points. Austin Matthews, 85 points in 74 games. With 40 goals to boot on that one, too. Willie Nylander also with 40 goals as well. John Tavares, also a great season from him, 80 points in 80 games. But then you have a significant fall off after that, and that's what I have difficulty with. Michael Bunting then comes in at number 5 with 49 points in 82 games. And what hurts there, too, is you have 103 penalty minutes to boot there. If you have undisciplined play from the Toronto Maple Leafs, Tampa Bay is just going to crush you on their power play. They have one of the more deadliest power plays in the entire league, and I don't think Toronto's penalty kill is going to do enough to help save that. Plus, you also have some mostly unproven playoff play by Ilya Samsonov for Toronto. Yes, he's been an upgrade in net, but his track record in the playoffs when he was with the Capitals was not good at all. So I want him to prove me wrong. I think a real difference maker for Toronto could be the return of Ryan O'Reilly as well. I think his play and his playoff experience and his grit is going to make a big time difference. Also, having Mark Giordano on the defensive lines as well is going to help for the Toronto Maple Leafs. But man, I've said Toronto in the past, and just like Tom, I've thought this is the year. This might be the year. When's it ever going to be the year, though? I mean, I want them to finally prove me. I want them to prove me wrong. Please prove me wrong. But win 4 games in April, and we will talk. So to that, I challenge Toronto. Please beat Tampa Bay because I want them to beat Tampa Bay. I'm not just trashing Toronto because I hate Toronto. I just don't see them as being stronger than Tampa Bay right now, and that's the difference maker to me. My prediction, Tampa Bay in 6. I don't know. I want to see Matthews Marner, Tavares. I want to see all three actually show up in the playoffs, because sometimes you have one show up and the other two don't, or you have two show up and then the other one just lays a big fat goose egg. Show up, please. Prove us all wrong so that way Toronto doesn't burn. Next, we probably have the most underwhelming playoff matchup probably of the entire first round. The Carolina Hurricane versus the New York Islanders. And all right, let's go for more controversy here. This is going to be fun. Tom, let's start with you. Carolina Hurricane versus the New York Islanders. Who wins and why?
Well, it depends. I want to ask a serious question before I get into this here. Anybody out there, do you have issues falling asleep at night? Like you really can't sleep, you have insomnia? Well, turn this one on because every game will lull you to sleep. This has every game with a 2-1 result written all over it. I'm sorry, it does. Carolina has gone into dead puck era hockey mode ever since Svechnikov got hurt and Pacioretty really never showed up to begin with. Islanders won in their defensive prowess. Not last year, obviously they didn't make it, but the previous two runs. They shut down teams like the Philadelphia Flyers with offensive juggernaut at the time. They shut down in 2011 Pittsburgh Penguins and the Boston Bruins, who were both had some offensive power up top as well at the time. And they did shut down the Florida Panthers in 2020. I'm sorry, I forgot about them. My apologies. So, who had Alexander Barkov at the time? I forgot who they played. I think there was prelims where they played the Panthers. I forgot who they played. In the first round that year. I know they beat the Flyers. They beat somebody else in 7, and I'm drawing a blank right now, and I forgot, and I am sorry. But I'll figure that out later. Anyways, if you look at these teams, man for man, you look at them, you go up and down the lineups. On forward, I would give the nod to Carolina with maybe a better fourth line and a third line. You could debate with the Islanders' third line about being maybe a little bit better. On D, Pelech and Pulock. We've seen it before, and we've seen it. We've seen it, like I said, not last year, but we saw it 2 years ago and 3 years ago. They can shut anybody down, those two. They're not that. Listen, it's not Brent Seabrook and Duncan Keith. It's not Paul Coffey and Charlie Huddy. It's not meant to be. It's not meant to be. They are a pure shutdown defensive pair, Pelech and Pulock. We know that. Oh, the Islanders beat Washington in that first round. They shut Ovechkin down. So I knew they shut down another forward. And that was who they shut down, obviously. So the Islanders have a better first pair on D. I think it could be a wash elsewhere with the second and third pairs. I think they can pretty much cancel each other out. But it's when you get into net and it's when you get into goal. And as we talked about before with the dead puck era, we talked about the teams who had went on runs before. I know I brought up Washington and Carolina, who kind of had better personnel up top. But then you look at teams back then, say like Buffalo with Dominik Hasek or Florida with John Van Beesbrook. And they won a lot of their series because of the goaltending. And that's what the Isles have with Ilya Sorokin. I'm going to go with the Islanders in 7 here. But this is going to be a close, boring series. And this is going to turn into Carolina having trouble again, winning away from home. Remember last year, Carolina's record on the road in the playoffs last year, a whopping 0-6. They couldn't win in Boston on the road. They couldn't win against the Rangers on the road. And the loss of Svechnikov, who disappeared in the playoffs last year, and I'm sure was licking his chops to prove himself this year, and Max Pacioretty, who I'm sure they brought in to be that depth forward, to give more scoring in the playoffs, is going to be paramount here. So I'm going with the Islanders in 7 in really a sleeper of a series.
Yeah, I mean, it's looking up and down Carolina's lineup and New York's lineup. I look at New York's lineup and I'm underwhelmed, but I'm also not surprised because they play defensive hockey and they're probably one of the better Eastern Conference teams at playing defensive hockey as well. And this was a team that was snake bitten throughout the season. They were missing Matthew Barzal for a good chunk of the season. We're missing JG Pajot for a little bit there, missing Kyle Palmieri for a significant amount of time, missing Josh Bailey for a significant amount of time, even missing Adam Pelech for a significant amount of time. But the tides really turned for the New York Islanders when they picked up Bo Horvat, and he's been a difference maker for the New York Islanders. 16 points in 30 games. Yeah, a little bit underwhelming, but he's played really well defensively so far to start his tenure with the New York Islanders, which it will end up being a long tenure with the New York Islanders. But I think that's going to be a difference maker here for the Islanders. But then I look on the Carolina side of things, and I'm underwhelmed, and I shouldn't be underwhelmed, because you look at the cast of characters on this team, and there's just nothing that stands out on this team. I mean, you had steady play from Martin Necas, who was your top point getter with 71 points in 82 games. Nice full season from him. I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, that might also be a career year for Martin Necas as well. Sebastian Aho, 67 points in 75 games. Good steady play. But then I just look more up and down this lineup, and I mean, Teuvo Teravainen, yeah, he missed some time, but 37 points in 68 games. Considering that the next point getter was Stefan Nason with 36 points in 78 games, I'm sorry, Teravainen should be doing better. Seth Jarvis could have done a lot better as well. He played some sheltered minutes, but should have played a lot better too. This is a Carolina team that's desperately missing Andrei Svechnikov. And like Tom had mentioned, ever since Carolina lost Andrei Svechnikov, they just went into full defensive trap mode. And yeah, it's been working. It's been winning games, but it's been winning some of the most boring games. Like really, really boring games. But that being said, I'm going to call the upset alert here. I do not see what other people see in the Carolina Hurricane. The Devils and the Rangers are both collectively better in the Metropolitan Division than the Carolina Hurricanes are right now. And I think the same about the New York Islanders, to be quite honest. It's going to be a low-scoring endeavor. It's going to be underwhelming in the scoring department. But it's going to come down to defense and goaltending. And to me, the Islanders are the clear winner in both departments. Yes, for the Carolina Hurricanes, adding Brent Burns was a really good idea. But losing Andrei Svechnikov before the playoffs, I think is going to kill them. With Svechnikov, I think Carolina would win this series pretty handedly. I probably wouldn't have any doubt in my mind. But I think the Islanders can take this series with strong play from Ilya Sorokin, who is a Vezina candidate in and of itself, and rightfully so. He's been one of the steadiest goaltenders, not only in the entire Eastern Conference, but in the entire NHL. Definitely one of the biggest reasons why the Islanders are in the spot that they're in right now. Quick shout out also, just former, Devils in general. Quick shout out to Zach Parise as well on a potential renaissance season for him, scoring 21 goals this season, pretty surprisingly for the New York Islanders. And he could be a difference maker in this series, bringing in his playoff experience as well. So my prediction here, I say the New York Islanders in 7. And now, finally, we get to our final playoff matchup, probably the most exciting playoff matchup. And for once, I don't think it's biased. For once, I don't think this is biased. This is probably the most exciting first round matchup. We saved it for last, of course. It's the New Jersey Devils versus Tom's New York Rangers. I know I certainly have my opinions. I know Tom certainly has his opinions. This is what you guys have been waiting for. So let's get right into this. New Jersey Devils versus the New York Rangers. Round 1. Tom, who comes out on top and why?
Rangers in 4, 7-0 results, all 4 games.
Oh, okay. So we're going there.
No, it's from a neutral perspective. This is really close to call. And as a Ranger fan, I'm on the fan hat side, on the fan side of it. I kind of was dreading this the other day. But as the days have gone on, I'm starting to feel a little bit better about it. So we can go on about the regular season record. We know what happened in the regular season. Rangers were 1-0-2 versus these same Devils. That's a fact. That's not opinion. And people can talk all they want about a regular season series. Yeah, but I mean, I remember in 2007, the Rangers were 1-1-2 against the Atlanta Thrashers. We all know what happened there. The Rangers basically destroyed the Thrashers. That 7-0 ass whipping in Game 3, I'll never forget, where Michael Nylander scored a hat trick. That was maybe the first Ranger playoff win in a long time that I could really be happy about. And, well, we can talk about it on the other side of things as well. In 2011, the Rangers were 3-1 against Washington. Washington knocked them out of the playoffs in 5 games in the first round. Series wasn't close. The Rangers last year against Tampa, 3-0. We all know what happened there. So that's an obvious out. Goaltending, another obvious one. I know everybody loves Vitek Vanacek. He's had a great year for the Devils. Guys, Igor won the Vezina last year. Igor, while not the Igor of last year, has really been good lately. Igor, over the last month, his goals against average have been 1.89. Igor, what we learned last year is when everybody thinks Igor is out of it, as we learned in the Pittsburgh series last year, he can really turn it on and he can really elevate it to the point where you're going, oh, you know what? This guy is in the game. On top of all of it, I think the Rangers' brain trust learned from the Lundqvist years to basically get the guys some run support up top and on D. Get some guys who can put some pucks in the net because they relied entirely too much on Henrik Lundqvist all those years ago. That's a whole nother thing that we can talk about another day. We talk about forward core. I am going to give the Rangers a slight advantage here. That first line's a Zibanejad, Patrick Kane, and Chris Kreider. I'm sorry, it's better than what the Devils have on their first line. And everybody can cry home to mama about Patrick Kane. Guys, and I tell this to everybody, they need to get over the fact that this is not Patrick Kane from 2015. Patrick Kane was not brought in here like a Mark Messier to lead this team to a Stanley Cup. He was brought in because they had a big hole on the right side and they needed some help. They got Tarasenko, obviously. Kravtsov, they just gave up on him. Kravtsov, I think they had every right to now. He can't get it. He can't figure it out in Vancouver either. He was brought in to contribute. Don't look at it like Mark Messier. Don't look at it like Wayne Gretzky. Look at it like Brett Hull and Luke Robitaille going to Detroit. Look at it like something like that. Kane has been fine. He's not who did I expect him to come in and win an Art Ross trophy? No. I think he's been fine. And I think there's a lot more to him than we've seen. Yes. But I also think the Rangers had in their mind over the last couple of weeks that salary cap situation where if somebody gets hurt and they have to LTIR somebody, the situations they could be in. So while I'm not saying the Rangers were throwing games, no, that belongs to the Columbus Blue Jackets who really were throwing games. I think the Rangers were playing extra cautiously in their last few regular season games to make sure nobody got hurt against a team like Buffalo or against a team like Toronto who was resting guys. So I'm going, the top six, and especially that kid line with the Rangers, I got to tip my head to the Rangers. I do. I have to. I'm sorry. It's just how I see it. And it's no knock against Jack Hughes. I think Jack Hughes is a better center than any of the Rangers have. But do the Devils have an Artemi Panarin? Do the Devils have a Vladimir Tarasenko? Timo Meier, good player, maybe more of a Tarasenko. Do they have another type player like that that's in a Patrick Kane mold? Do they have a Chris Kreider? Do they have guys like it? Do they have, and now they have Andre Palat? Yes. Palat is a game breaker in the playoffs. Rangers have a guy named Vincent Trocheck who can do the same thing. Do they have a kid line who can just suffocate teams to death down in their own zone if you get yourself in trouble against them? I got to go forward-wise. I got to give it to the Rangers here. I do. Now, if we're going on D, I'm actually going to give it to the Devils, believe it or not. Now, the Rangers' first pair, Fox and Lindgren, we know what they can do. It's an obvious. The second pair this year has had me scratching my head. Now, that second pair last year was paramount in the run the Rangers went on. If Jacob Trouba can throw bone-crunching hits and lead the team, and K'Andre Miller can go out and score those big goals like he scored last year when nobody thought he would, then yeah. But this year it hasn't been that way. A lot of times Trouba has had to clean up K'Andre's mess. A lot of times Trouba's gone to throw in a big hit and got himself out of position. A lot of times Miller's pinched in the offensive zone to lead to odd man rushes going back down, which is what I was dreading because I remember the series against Pittsburgh in 2016 with the Rangers. And a lot of times K'Andre Miller has taken himself out of position that's led to goals. I don't know if last year's playoff second pairing is going to show up or this year's second pairing is going to show up. And that's a big, big, big concern in my mind right now with them. The Devils' third pairing right now could have Luke Hughes on it. Right now, I'm just on daily faceoff, and I know I'm not going to take it to heart. We have Brendan Smith and Luke Hughes, and I'm not going to beat around the bush. Luke Hughes the other night, that was a great goal that he scored. You have Brendan Smith and Luke Hughes versus potentially Braden Schneider and either Nika Mikkola or Ben Harper. Third pair with the Devils, I'm giving it over to the third pair with the Rangers. It's not by a landslide, but it's by a little bit, yeah. Braden Schneider's been good. Nico Mikkola has been good, but Nico Mikkola is another one. He gets himself into trouble sometimes with penalties. He does. So actually, defensive-wise, I'm going to give it to the Devils, believe it or not. I mentioned goaltending. Coaching, you know what? I do got to give it to Gallant. I feel like Gallant can adjust a little more than Lindy Ruff, and it's no knock on Lindy Ruff. But there's one thing I've noticed through Ruff's tenure. Ruff's teams in Buffalo were defensive-minded until they weren't anymore when he had Briere injury, and they became offensive-minded. Ruff's teams in Dallas were offensive-minded. This team is offensive-minded. But I'm just wondering that if the offense gets taken away here, can Lindy Ruff adjust? And it was the same thing when he was in Buffalo. When they would play defensive-minded hockey, and you had Dominik Hasek basically doing headstands in the crease, was great for a while. But when teams would use offensive firepower against those Sabres teams, could Lindy Ruff adjust? And I got to give the coaching as to Gerard Gallant here. I do. So on top of all this is, like I said, a very, very tough decision here. Very tough decision for me. The Devils have been good this year. I can't say they haven't been. Much as I don't want to say this, they have been good. They've been a surprise team, and every Devil fan should be proud as hell of what this team did this year. They should. So this is very tough. But this group here, kind of like teams of the Pittsburgh Penguins the first year with Sidney Crosby in the playoffs, and the Washington Capitals without Ovechkin the first year in the playoffs, they haven't been through it yet. And the Penguins stared down a veteran Ladin. I mentioned him before, Ottawa Senators team. The Capitals stared down a Philadelphia Flyers team who had experience too. So this is not going to be an easy series. This is not going to be an easy call for me. But I got to go with some intangibles here. I have to go with my favorite team here, the Rangers, in 6 games.
Well, there you have it from Tom there, but it's obvious this is going to be the series that Tom and I are going to be glued to, as well as many others. I mean, this might be the must-watch series of the first round. And boy, oh boy, this could go either which way. Both teams are very good in their own right. I really wish that both of these teams were not facing off in the first round, because I think you pin the Rangers and the Devils
Panthers,
against
by
different...
the way.
Huh?
I said thanks, Panthers, by the way.
Yeah. You pin the Rangers and Devils in a different matchup, they both win their matchups pretty handedly, I think, and might meet in the second round. But, man, both teams have an area where they excel. And where Tom said he thought that the Devils' defense was a little bit better, I actually think the Rangers' defense is a little bit better. Don't get me wrong. I really like the Devils' defense. And one thing that Tom mentioned was that Luke Hughes could make an appearance. I don't know if Luke Hughes makes an appearance in the playoffs, at least at the very beginning of the series, at least. I think at the beginning of the series, I think likely what you could expect from Lindy Ruff is Jonas Siegenthaler and Dougie Hamilton up top on the top pairing, match that up against the Rangers with Ryan Lindgren and Adam Fox. And even though I think it's close between Adam Fox and Dougie Hamilton in terms of talented defensemen, I got to give the edge to the Rangers on that top pairing, just because I think, I don't know, Adam Fox just has the slight edge, and his instincts on the defensive end kick in a little bit better than Dougie Hamilton's lately. On the second pairing for the Devils, you've got Ryan Graves and John Marino, versus for the Rangers, it's Jacob Trouba and
Keandre Miller.
Keandre Miller. I'm going to give the edge to the Devils on that one. I think Ryan Graves and John Marino, their decision-making and their defensive end has been fantastic this year. They've been one of the most consistent pairings for the Devils this year defensively, and I think it's going to show in the playoffs as well. John Marino has been a revelation for the Devils. Picking him up in the offseason was the best move that Tom Fitzgerald could have made for the New Jersey Devils. On the third pairing for the Devils, likely what I have in my head is probably going to be Kevin Ball on the left-hand side and Damon Severson on the right-hand side. And put that up against with the Rangers. Remind me, it's Nico Mikkola and who?
Braden Schneider.
I might give the edge there to the Rangers, honestly, because Kevin Ball is inexperienced in the playoffs. He's been very, very good in the past month.
Let's just say if Mikkola screws up badly early on, I could easily see Ben Harper stepping in his spot.
Oh, same. I could see that happening too. And the same goes with either Jonas Siegenthaler or Kevin Ball. If either of them falter at any point, I could see Brendan Smith or Luke Hughes or both come in relief of both of them, or maybe even Damon Severson as well. I think it's possible. I give the slight edge to the Rangers here, though, defensively. For the Devils, where they have excelled has an offensive firepower and scoring depth and just speed in general. the name of the Devils this year has been speed. Their speed has been killing teams left and right, and they might be the fastest team in the NHL. The Devils had 6 players score 20 or more goals this year. That's Jack Hughes, Nico Hischier, Jesper Bratt, Dawson Mercer, Dougie Hamilton, and Tomas Tatar. And I know a lot of Rangers fans are going to eviscerate me for this one, but I don't know. I think the Devils run a little bit deeper on the forward side of things, and where I think they run the deepest has been somewhere where the Rangers have been trying to address this depth for years. It's at center. I think center depth for the Devils is significantly better than the Rangers center depth, and where it really comes down to is winning faceoffs and also maintaining control in the offensive zone and forecheck. Jack Hughes.
Line two, you got us beat by a mile. I'll say that. I'll say Hischier, whether it's Hughes line 1 or Hischier line 1. I like Vincent Trocheck, but if you're going just on man for man, they're better. And like I said before, Trocheck does turn it on in big games.
Yeah.
But we got to see it first.
That's true. On the third line, Eric Haula as your third line center has been very steady this year, really coming on in the last month as well, and has been really, really good in the faceoff circle, but he hasn't been the best in the faceoff circle. The best in the faceoff circle this year, actually second best in the entire NHL. Michael McLeod on the fourth line, coming back also from a pretty scary concussion protocol at the hands of Brad Marchand late this season, but it looks like Michael McLeod is going to be ready for game 1 from what it looks like right now. The BMW line, line 4, Miles Wood, Michael McLeod, Nathan Bastian has been very, very good this season when they've played. Really had a lot of teams have had trouble with that line. And you even take out, Miles Wood and insert Curtis Lazar, or insert Curtis Lazar in for any of those 4 players. And the Devils just have depth all up and down line 1 through line 4. And the depth really comes in their speed. And they also have playoff experience too. I mean, you sprinkle in some playoff experience from Tomas Tatar, from Andre Palat, from Eric Haula, from Curtis Lazar, guys with gritty experience. Brendan Smith also has some gritty playoff experience too. Dougie Hamilton is no stranger to the playoffs as well. Ryan Graves, John Marino, all guys with deep levels of playoff experience. So the Devils aren't as inexperienced as people realize. Yes, there are players on this team that have not really sniffed the playoffs before. Nico Hischier had a cup of coffee a few years ago. Jack Hughes really never experienced it, has experienced high level of play with Team USA, certainly. But yeah, I just don't get necessarily the misnomer of they're really not experienced. You gain that experience.
It's not so much experience as in experienced together. The majority of this Ranger team were all there last year. I mean, sub out Kane and Tarasenko and sub out Jimmy Vesey on your forwards.
And that's true too.
Yeah, but you have 9 out of your 12 forwards were there last year. 5 of your 6 defensemen were there last year. Your starting goalie was there last year.
That's valid. And that's true. And I'm not discrediting that either. It's where Rangers fans,
when I say experience, I don't mean man for man experience. I mean experience together as a team is what I mean.
Right. And it's also with Rangers fans when they say we have Patrick Kane. Yeah, but you don't have Patrick Kane from 2014. You have Patrick Kane now. So
aware, but Patrick Kane now is not
it's still no slouch.
Patrick Kane was a 90-point player last year.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, listen. They got to get off of this Mark. I'm sorry. You got to get off of this Mark Messier philosophy. Enough is enough.
I just love to rile you up. That's really what it's all about. Lastly, you come down to, honestly, I think the push right now is in net. Many Rangers fans are quick to say that Igor is the clear better goaltender. And yes, I do think Igor is the better goaltender. But the stats this year do beg to differ. And I say that only because Vitek Vanacek and Igor Shesterkin have very close stats this year, closely related stats. Their goals against are nearly identical. Their save percentage is nearly identical. And although I would give the benefit of the doubt to Igor Shesterkin in this matchup, don't discount Vitek Vanacek. Don't write him off. I think he can turn it on when the time is most important. Either way, It's going to be an amazing series. It's going to be a lot of fun. I think it's going to go to the brink. I'm going to say that this goes to 7. And the reason why I say this goes to 7 is because I think home ice advantage is going to potentially help New Jersey here. Couple that with their regular season win record for Devils against the Rangers this year. And I have my decision. And yeah, I'm going to be a homer on this one, but deal with it. My prediction, the New Jersey Devils in 7 games. And yes, I do think it's going to go to 7 games. And it's going to be an amazing series. No team that loses this matchup should be upset. The Rangers are going to be back here next year. The Devils are going to be back here next year. It's just, here and now. So we'll have to see what happens. But as usual, guys, what do you guys think? Do you agree? Do you disagree with our takes? Let us know down in the comments section below. Join the conversation there. And while you're there, make sure you hit the subscribe button down below, youtube.com/i80sports. Hit the bell notifications so that way you guys know when we go live, because we'll probably be going live to cover some of the Stanley Cup playoffs. And yeah, we've missed a little bit of news tidbits with people getting fired and some changing of the guard in some organizations. We are going to cover that in a catch-up video sometime soon, so you don't want to miss that. The only way that you don't miss that, subscribe, hit the bell notification, let us know down below. And if you're on Twitter, make sure that you follow us at I80_sports NHL. And if you follow us already, thank you guys so much, because we greatly appreciate it. Before we go, we are going to just do our question of the day, which the question of the day here, pretty simple. Which team is the likeliest to get upset in the first round? Tom, who do you think?
Vegas. This is not I'd say this isn't your grandfather's Vegas Golden Knights, but then you'd probably have to be like maybe a fox or an ant or something whose lifespan is that small, where your grandfather would have been alive 4 years ago. But
Maybe.
They're not the same Vegas Golden Knights from 2018.
This ain't your grandfather's Vegas Golden Knights here, Sonny. I remember seeing them in the 2018 playoffs. But
no, it's the philosophy in Vegas has turned from a score by committee and do it by committee team to go top heavy and everything and disregard goaltending and the like. And even if Vegas gets out of round 1, they're not getting out of round 2.
Yeah. We'll see. For me, Carolina, the Carolina Hurricanes, I've already said it enough. I don't see what anybody else sees in this team, and I honestly think the rest of the Metropolitan Division is honestly better than the Carolina Hurricanes, and I think it's going to start slowly turning into a downward spiral for the Carolina Hurricanes. As Tom mentioned a few weeks ago, actually, we could be thinking about the Carolina Hurricanes very much like the San Jose Sharks of the mid-2000s as well. Mm-hmm. Could be very much the case here. But like I said, join the conversation down below. Let us know what you guys think. And let's turn our attention away from here. Let's start watching some playoff hockey. So with that being said, I'm Brian. He's been Tom. This has been our first round playoff preview for the 2023 Stanley Cup playoffs here at I80 Sports. Thanks for joining us, guys. Go Devils!
Go Rangers!